Is this going live? Whoever knows with these things. Is it live? Potentially. Okay. YouTube says that I'm live. I've probably just been saying things and just looking like a weirdo in that video as I'm seeing there. Anyway, hello. Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. Here we go. We can talk about monitors. This stream, very casual, just chatting about monitors, monitor recommendations. I thought, you know what, we've just been doing a bunch of recommendation videos recently. And so it might be a good opportunity if someone wants a personal recommendation, wants a few more insights and thoughts on some of the monitors that I've been testing, then yeah, good opportunity to do so. So yeah, just be live for, I don't know, an hour, couple of hours, not sure. But either way, we'll be chatting about monitors and monitor recommendations. So I've got some browser windows ready to do some research. I've got my monitors spreadsheet with all the monitors that I've been testing in it. Obviously, probably going to get some questions about monitors I haven't tested, so I'll try my best with those monitors. But in the last couple of years, how many have I tested here? 158 monitors in my spreadsheet. So hopefully with some of those, people will be very interested in talking about some of those. So anyway, before we get into it, I did see a few comments just before we went live that are probably worth addressing first up. So one of them, Julian here, says recommendation for a 27-inch monitor for gaming and productivity around $450 AUD, tossing up between a Samsung 27GP850, I assume you mean the LG 27GP850 or the MSI. So the MSI probably being the G274QPF-QD, which I recommended in my latest monitors video. And I think if you're buying like a 27-inch like 1440p gaming productivity monitor for around that price, a lot of those products are so similar that it's really hard to go, you know, super wrong with those type of products. Like their performance, I mean, you might get one monitor has slightly better contrast, one monitor has slightly better response times, and even slightly different response time tuning. But at the end of the day, the performance you get out of those panels is pretty similar. So unless there's like a specific feature that you want, the 27GP850, for example, is pretty well tuned for response time performance across the range. If that's something that you really want, then you would go with something like that. The MSI monitor, though, has better contrast ratio, slightly wider color gamut. So, you know, if that's important to you, then that's the sort of product that I would go for. But yeah, so that's probably how I would go on that one. And I've seen a few comments as well about the LG C2, LG C3. You know, is that still a good monitor to buy? And I think a lot of people in the comments have been pretty much nailing that one. I think it is still a good monitor to purchase. LG C3 is pretty similar to the LG C2. Our friends over at TFT Central looked at that product and found it to be pretty much the same as the LG C2. So whichever way you go, I still think it's a pretty capable product. I think the one thing I'd sort of be holding off on a little bit potentially is that the C4, so the newest model that will be coming out in 2024, is rumored to increase the refresh rate from 120 to 144 hertz. Not a massive difference, I wouldn't say, but that could be something to, you know, push your recommendation one way or another. Just wait a little bit to get a C4. Grab the C3 right now, although the C4 will be much more expensive when it comes out. I imagine it'll be more like $1,500 US at, you know, I think you can get the C2 for what, like, or C3 for like under $1,000 these days. Let me just have a look. Oh, you can't see it on PC Part Picker. Forget that. Anyway, that should be an interesting product for people to check out in the new year. So yeah, not sure if they'll improve other aspects like brightness and so forth. It'd be nice if we saw the more flagship TV features at like 55-inch. They tend to be a bit brighter than the 42-inch models. So yeah, that would be pretty nice to get down a bit low. MSI G274 QPF sold at Costco here. It was on sale for $170. So that's a really good price if you happen to get that. Daniel asks, hi Tim, thanks for all your hard work with your monitor reviews. I've been meaning to upgrade my Samsung Odyssey G7 to a better 1440p monitor or maybe an entry-level 4K monitor. Could I get options? I guess it would really depend on the price that you're looking at. If you've got a Samsung Odyssey G7, then you've probably paid $600, $700 US or the equivalent in your region for that product. So yeah, I would say that monitor is still very good today. So if you're looking for an upgrade, I'd probably be considering things like HDR, like real HDR as the option to go as sort of a serious upgrade. I think if you're looking for entry-level 4K, like you were going, I don't know, Odyssey G7 to like a 27-inch 4K 160 Hz IPS, something like, what is it, the Gigabyte M27U or something like that. I'm not sure that's too much of an upgrade. It depends what you're doing though. Like if your gaming is your primary focus, the resolution upgrade's probably not going to be massive for you. But if you're using it for like productivity work, web documents, spreadsheets, video editing, then 4K would be a pretty substantial improvement. So yeah, it really just depends on what you were doing there and also your budget as well. I would probably, if your budget is sort of similar to the Odyssey G7's price back when it was released, I'd probably still wait probably another year or two just to have a look at, can we get true good quality HDR products down around, I don't know, $600? They're probably not quite there yet. I am about to test actually a couple of entry-level sort of, well, not entry-level, but mid-range $400, $500 HDR products, like mini LED backlights, things like that. So we'll see whether those are reasonable. But yeah, I mean, you're probably going to need to stretch your budget to like $800 US or the equivalent. That's when you start to see those 1440p 240 Hz OLEDs. I think that'd be a pretty good upgrade, but something like that would be nice. So yes, that would be very interesting to see. So getting lots of comments here, so I'm just going to have to pick and choose whatever I happen to see with my eyes on the screen here when it pops up. So let's have a look here. Is there a best of both worlds productivity and gaming 32-inch 4K monitor? HDR price is not an issue. I was leaning towards the Neo G7/G8, but I'm not too sure as it's VA. I do a lot of web browsing. Good product for both of those use cases. The concern there would be the curve. So it just depends how much you're going to be affected by the 1000R curve. It is pretty curved compared to flat monitors, especially at 32 inches. So it does feel a little curved in. Great for gaming though, so that's probably one aspect, and the HDR performance is good as well. Probably would get the Neo G7 over the G8 just for the, not necessarily flickering issues, but the scan lines and things that I mentioned with the Neo G8. And the Neo G7 is pretty cheap these days as well. I think it hovers just under, let's actually have a look. I think it was just under $1,000 US the last time I had a look. Oh, you can get it for $850 at the moment. That's not too bad. So this is PC Part Picker. Yeah, you can get them from Amazon, Best Buy, Newegg around that $900, $850 range. I think that's pretty good. That's a pretty good price for something like that. I guess if price is not an issue, there are the IPS options as well, which tend to be more expensive. I haven't looked too in depth at some of those options, but yeah, it just depends on how much you're willing to spend, because going from like a Neo G7 up to those IPS, you could be looking at spending an extra $400, $500 US, which may not be worth it. But those are flat. They've got a few different characteristics, better viewing angles, those sorts of things to consider. So that could be something that you'd be interested in. But yeah, I think the VA panel isn't too much of a concern. Performance is very fast, good quality, contrast ratio. So yeah, all those sorts of things I think would be pretty suitable with those sorts of things. So what else we got here? I'm very afraid of burn-in. I'm considering going mini LED. Do you have any experience with mini LED? So like I said before, yeah, we'll be testing a few more of the mini LED sort of more entry mid-range products. I've got one from Cooler Master that's in at the moment. It's a VA panel with, I think it's 576 zones. I think because there's also a 330 something zone panel, but I think it's the 500 zone panel. That's currently testing at the moment, so you'll see that review soon. I should also be getting the Acer, what is it? It's like Acer product names are very difficult to remember, but there's a 4K monitor, mini LED IPS, and I think there's a VA monitor as well, 1440p with like the 300 zone one. I should be getting both of those to test out soon as well. So I think those will sort of inform a lot of the mini LED, like is that worth getting over an OLED? But I would personally wouldn't be super concerned with the burn-in. It really depends on your use case, I guess. If you like gaming most of the time, probably not too much of a consideration. And I think on top of that, like there are monitors that do have burn-in warranties. So if you're buying like the Alienware DWF or something like that, that does have that 3-year burn-in warranty. I don't know how, whether they'll super honor that, depending on the level of burn-in that you have. But that is certainly something to consider, give you that peace of mind. That's something I'll be really looking out for future monitors like 2024, 2025 OLEDs. Do they have burn-in warranty? Because as OLED panels improve, manufacturers should be providing customers that peace of mind, because we don't really know as testers like how long a monitor that's OLED is going to last. Like it's very difficult for us to say, yeah, okay, we're going to test this for the next 4 years and see how the burn-in goes, because by the time 4 years comes around, it's too late. People have already bought that monitor and used it. So I think the best mitigating factor for that would be like yeah, as I said, burn-in warranties. So yeah, I'd be hoping to see that sort of thing with future products. But yeah, I wouldn't be super concerned about the burn-in. Probably check out, as I said, mini LED products, some of the upcoming reviews that we'll be doing on the channel as well. So yeah, we'll be checking out that soon. All right, got a few more questions here, a few more super chats. Thanks for people sending those in. When will we see 8K 144 hertz, 28 to 32 inch, you think, 2025? Yeah, I haven't heard too much about panel development for 8K, especially at higher refresh rates. I think there's a couple of limitations there, processing hardware, the display port limitations and things. I guess they could use DSC, but I imagine they'd be trying to, target display port 2.1, HDMI 2.1, high performance sort of things. And again, the question marks would be around like, what's the demand for an 8K 144 hertz monitor? I don't imagine it would be too high. The benefits at that size for gaming over 4K, questionable. Maybe at 32 inch you'd see a benefit. You'd probably be looking more at higher screen size sort of monitors for 8K to make sense there. So yeah, haven't heard too much about panel development for something like that, which means it's probably not coming anytime soon. But I would imagine at some point in the future, we will see higher refresh rate 8K monitors, hopefully in that range as well. I think 32 inch 8K with that sort of spec would be pretty nice, especially for like dual use case, web browsing, video editing for something like me would be nice. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. Apart from 2.1, I've seen the AW2723DF has the best out-of-the-box accuracy in sRGB creator mode. This is for console because you cannot calibrate on them. I had the MAG274QF-QD and it was terrible on console. If you have that MSI monitor, I'd potentially consider doing the firmware update that does give you the additional modes, things like sRGB mode and something like that. The 2723DF is not something that I've reviewed, but let's have a look. Best color accuracy out of the box. I can probably tell you which one of those types of monitors has the best performance. Let me take a look at my spreadsheet here. We'll sort by 1440p. Let's have a look at calibrated performance. There are some good monitors, I believe, that have those sorts of performance out of the box. So I think in the past, what I've tested, if you're looking for a high-end monitor, the Asus PG27AQN is very good out of the box. LG 27GP850 in its sRGB mode. Again, I was getting an sRGB color checker Delta E of 3.4. That's pretty good. Anything below 5, I tend to think is pretty good for an sRGB mode. The 32GP850 from LG as well had a pretty good color checker Delta E for sRGB there. I guess it would depend as well on the grayscale performance, which I don't have in this spreadsheet just at the moment. So yeah, those are probably the products I'd be looking at. Gigabyte M27QP as well performed well in my review, just looking at this list of monitors I've got in front of me here. So those are probably the products that I'd consider from those that I've personally tested. But, obviously a lot of those options I'm now looking at are not 240 hertz options. What did the M27QX get? Reasonable, below 5 for the M27QX. That's probably an option. I think the MSI monitor wasn't quite as well calibrated out of the box, although the MAG274QRX is one potential option as well. So yeah, some of those monitors, the XG27AQMR as well, that's a 300 hertz IPS monitor. I'd flag that one just at the moment. Let me get onto my screen capture here. Let's have a look at the XG. Let's see if that's still good pricing on this monitor, because I saw the other day that this was like a $500 monitor now. So this is their 300 hertz 1440p option 27 inch. When I reviewed it, it was like $650. So that was more down this end of the chart. I think even 180 days. I reviewed it like around here when it was about $650, and I felt it was a little expensive for 1440p 300 hertz, but this is a really well-tuned monitor. So if you're thinking of getting something like that Dell, which was, I don't know, probably a little cheaper, $500 US as well through the Dell website. This monitor, reasonably good color performance, really well tuned. It's got nice single overdrive mode experience. That's probably something I'd be considering. But then again, I haven't tested the Dell monitor, so it's hard to say like how that would compare to, that Asus monitor. But again, that's something to consider. Will you review the Asus PG38UQ soon? Hopefully. Asus, they tend to send out a lot of their higher end models over time. So that is certainly one product that I'm interested in testing. That is a 38-inch, 4K monitor. It's supposed to have, HDR performance and things like that. So yeah, I'm hoping to test that out at some point. But with Asus, it does depend on their schedules and release schedules and things like that. So yeah, hoping to get to that soon. More super ultra wide 1440p products and content soon. So yeah, the other day I bought the Samsung Odyssey OLED G9. A lot of people have been requesting that product. The reason why I haven't tested it up until this point was, well, first of all, Samsung, I emailed them a few times asking if they wanted to send out a review unit, never responded. So don't know what's happening there, but yeah, they'd never got back to me. So I guess they're not sending one out. And then for a while there, the Samsung store, which was one of the few places in Australia you could actually buy that monitor, they weren't shipping to my postcode. So I live sort of out in the country, a bit rurally. So I'm not always covered by like postal services, especially for, you buy a large monitor. Sometimes they'll use like a courier or something. So I couldn't actually buy one. But recently on their Black Friday sales, I noticed that they did actually update the postal service. So I could get it sent out here now. So I've ordered one. So you'll see that hopefully, I think the estimated shipping date is like early 2024, like January, first couple of days in January. So that's probably around the time you'll see that review. And then hopefully we'll get to the MSI monitor as well. And then later down the line as well, the Samsung 57-inch version. I think it's 57-inch. Yeah, that one I'll probably have to buy as well, just because, again, Samsung and their no emailing. I just snagged the LG 27GR83Q for $300 US. Hope it's a good upgrade from my Dell S2721 DGF. That's a great price for that monitor. That's a really good price. So for those who aren't super familiar with this monitor, let's get it up on the screen here. This is... Oh, it's out of stock. Obviously, a lot of people buying it. So this is LG's 27-inch 1440p 240Hz IPS gaming monitor. I think it's a really good product. It performs really well across the testing. I sort of would have it up against, the MSI G274 QPX, I think it's called, Gigabyte M27QX. This monitor performs pretty well, if not better than those monitors. And in fact, I'd probably pay a small premium for this over some of those Gigabyte slash MSI products. And those are around like $330, $350 US. So if you could find one for $300 US, that's a really good deal. And I think you'll be getting a pretty substantial upgrade over the S2721 DGF. You'll be getting, I think, a better contrast ratio. You'll be getting faster response times, obviously the higher refresh rate. And if you use it for competitive games, I think you'd be pretty impressed with that. So that's a good price, really good price. Another question that's probably related to this is, what do you think about LG using a non-LG panel in the 27GR83Q monitor? Seems like an odd choice to me. So yeah, this comes down to LG Display and LG Electronics being separate companies. I think they're technically separate, but obviously they're owned by LG as a conglomerate. So LG Electronics makes the monitors, TVs from LG. So all LG products, LG Electronics, but the display manufacturing, the display research, all the production of panels and stuff is handled by LG Display. So LG Electronics still has to buy LG Display panels from LG Display under contract like any other panel manufacturer. You'd think they might have some sort of incentive to use LG Display, and I imagine that there's, contractual things going on there so that they would most of the time use LG Display for the panels in their products, and that certainly has been the case most of the time. But if there's like a panel that isn't quite hitting the requirements that LG Electronics would want for one of their monitors, like for example, a cheaper, panel that does 1440p 240Hz, if LG Display just doesn't have that, then they're going to look for other panel manufacturers. So that could be your BOE. I think that uses a BOE panel, and sort of alternate options there. So LG, as I said, they typically use LG Display, but they have in the past looked at other products as well. So yeah, that's certainly one option. AW3423DW versus Odyssey OLED G8 at $900. This is a really tough one because I saw that they're both around the same price at the moment, and they both would be right up there in terms of my sort of preference for the QD OLED ultrawides. Again, you're looking at DW versus DWF. If we're talking DWF there at $900, then yeah, that's probably a bit closer. I'd probably get the Odyssey OLED G8 over the DW, the original model, just because it's fanless, less annoying fan behavior. I think they've fixed some of the firmware there, but it could probably be tuned a little better in some of the other areas. So if you're talking specifically DW, get the OLED G8. If you're talking DWF, again, it's a toss-up. I think it'd come down to sort of the specific features that you'd want. The OLED G8 has the smart TV functionality. So if you really wanted, like, let's say, for example, you wanted to use Amazon Prime Video or Netflix or something with the proper HDR output through the smart TV functionality, the OLED G8 would do that for you. Whereas if you get the DWF, you have to be relying on like PC apps, which I know some of those apps don't have proper HDR support through the PC version of the app. So you'd basically be losing out on HDR functionality there. But then the OLED G8, it doesn't support Dolby Vision, which I think is a bit of a downside. But anyway, that's probably one angle I'd go for the OLED G8. I also think the design's a little better. It's fanless, but then again, it has got those weird mini DisplayPort connectors I'm not a huge fan of. And the DWF is a safer option to be used across all different GPU manufacturers. If you've got an AMD GPU, DWF, since the firmware update, is rock solid, works really well on NVIDIA as well. The OLED G8 still has a few interesting aspects to it with performance across the two different brands at the moment. So yeah, I think if you're using an NVIDIA GPU, the OLED G8 performs a little better. It's a little better able to be tuned, but the DWF, has its advantages as well, especially after those firmware updates. So I don't think you can go wrong with either of those products, to be honest. Still pretty good. With the trend of laptop screens going 16 by 10 and latest firmware for MAG 274 QRX added 16 by 10, do you think we'll see a desktop monitor going 16:10? I'd hope so. I love that aspect ratio. I think it gives you a bit more vertical space, which is better for a lot of productivity apps than the slightly wider widescreen format. However, whether or not they'd make gaming monitors like that is questionable, because I think a lot of games are probably, the general support there is for 16 by 9. Obviously, a lot of games would work on a 16 by 10 monitor, but you sort of be tossing up like, what's the market going to be like for a 16 by 10 monitor? Not sure. Don't imagine it would be super big. So yeah, you probably need to wait and see on that one. I have a Samsung G70A 28-inch 4K. Do you think the Alienware AW3423 DWF is worth a resolution downgrade for the superior color contrast and HDR? It was on sale down to $799. So yeah, that Samsung monitor is pretty good. I've recommended it in the past, so that's definitely a good monitor to have. Is it worth a resolution downgrade? I think if you're talking purely gaming, HDR is better than resolution. So I would personally prefer the contrast and HDR over the higher resolution. But then again, it depends, you have to be playing games that support HDR. So that'd be more of like your single player type of games. A lot of the latest PC games have really good HDR support. So if you are playing like latest cutting edge AAA titles, that's one to go for. The G70A 28-inch, yeah, I think it probably would be worth it. But then again, if you're doing like productivity work, then obviously there's burn-in considerations, lower resolution, text quality is probably something as well. So yeah, it just depends on your use case. I think if it was pure gaming though, $800, you want to do that sort of upgrade, yeah, I'd probably consider it. How does the LG 32GP83A hold up these days? You can get those for $500, can you? Let me have a look. 34 GP83A. Let's have a look. $550. That's pretty good. So when we reviewed this monitor, we didn't review the GP83A version. We reviewed the, whatever it was, GP950 or 850 or whatever it was. So I think that's a pretty good price. Obviously, there's a lot of price competition with the QD OLEDs at the moment. We just talked about an $800 QD OLED. So yeah, I would say that, yeah, if you're sort of looking for $500, it's probably enough to sacrifice HDR performance. You probably need to spend, again, like up to around $800, $900, which is a big price increase over this. So I'd say that's a pretty good price for that. And yeah, like the idea of getting OLED, but I'm afraid of burn-in and text smear. Yeah, fair enough. I think if I was buying like an IPS ultrawide, this is the sort of price I'd be wanting to target. And this is one of the better ones in terms of its performance, good response times. It's not a VA panel, so you're not having to deal with dark level smearing and things that you would often see for some of the lower cost VA monitors, especially the 34-inch ultrawides. Yeah, not super impressive in terms of performance. That's a good price, I think, a good fair price for something like that. What else we got here? Do you think having a KVM built into the monitor for work from home and play is worth it, or do I buy a dedicated KVM? Any lag with mice and keyboard on a KVM? So I haven't tested input lag with KVMs. There's probably other channels out there that have done that testing, especially for competitive type of gaming. I think if you're super concerned about input lag, like you're counting every last millisecond, then you probably wouldn't use a KVM, because I'm thinking there probably would be even just a few milliseconds of lag there. So yeah, that's probably how I would go with it. But with the KVMs built into monitors, they tend to work pretty well, and they're a built-in solution, so you don't have to have like a second box on your desk somewhere that has everything plugged in. You're going to have as well better pass-through of all the capabilities. So depending on the KVM you've got, some of them don't pass through things like adaptive sync support properly. So it just depends on the exact product you get there. But with monitors obviously being built in, yeah, you can switch between all your inputs and still utilize adaptive sync support and HDR. Not that a lot of HDR monitors have KVMs, come to think of it, but yeah, those are the sorts of features that may be lacking depending on the KVM you get. So I think personally, if I was wanting a KVM in a monitor, I would buy one that has one built in, as opposed to a dedicated KVM. And there's a lot of good lower cost options these days that, you're not spending too much more to get a KVM, or even they'll be the exact same price as a non-KVM monitor with similar performance, but with a KVM. So yeah. Which is the best 27-inch 1440p solely for gaming in the $200 to $300-ish range, playing RPG and FPS, but not competitive? So yeah, there's a couple of options that I've been recommending recently, things like Gigabyte M27QP, the MSI G274 QPF-QD, LG 27 GP850, GP83B, all the LG options. I think if you're single player gaming, you're playing RPG and FPS, I tend more towards the color performance side of things than performance. So for example, the LG monitors have the faster response times, better tuning across the refresh rate range. So you get a single overdrive mode experience, which means you don't have to, let's say you're playing at a high refresh rate on one game, lower refresh rate on the other game. You don't have to switch between those two modes. You can just use one mode for the whole time. And so that's one advantage of the LG, but you get a weaker contrast ratio, which I think, yeah, it's pretty underwhelming at this stage. You're only looking at like 750, 800 to 1 sort of contrast ratio on those monitors. So that's a downside in that price range. Whereas if you go with like the MSI or the Gigabyte monitors, you're getting more like 900 to 1, 1000 to 1, which I think is much better. Well, it's not hugely different. And I guess the response time performance isn't hugely different either. As I mentioned earlier in the stream, a lot of those 1440p IPS panels are very similar. So yeah, I'd probably tend to more towards that. The MSI monitor, for example, has a wide color gamut. I don't know if you want to be calibrating your monitor or using it for wide gamut with the extra saturation that some people like. But what did it get in terms of its color accuracy in the various different modes? Yeah, the MSI was a little inaccurate in the sRGB mode. The Gigabyte monitor was 3.25 Delta E color checker. That's pretty good. So yeah, maybe the Gigabyte monitor would be something in that sort of range. And yeah, you can get those, I think these days for the M27QP, which is the M27Q Pro. Let's have a look. They're down around $250 at the moment. So I think they were, yeah, more like $260, $270. Now at $250, that's a pretty good price, pretty much bang in the middle of your price range there. That's probably something that I would get. Obviously, you might want to consider, 27-inch, yeah, so not considering 32-inch, so that makes sense. Love your content. Where do you see OLED prices over the short and long term? Will other tech be forced to capitulate if prices continue their decline? They've already come down quite a lot. So when we first looked at the QD OLED monitors, the 34-inch ultrawides, for example, they started at $1,300 US. There were some premium monitors at like $1,500 US. But now you can get the Alienware DWF for like $800, and that launched at $1,100. So it's already come down in a year by about $300 US. And that's not like a Black Friday price. That price has been around since, I think, October. So yeah, they're already putting a lot of price pressure for QD OLEDs. And again, 1440p, 240Hz W OLEDs, those have been down around $800 as well. Monitors like the AOC that we tested on the channel recently. I think the LG has been down around $800. There's the Acer model as well, $800. And those all debuted at $1,000. So we've already seen like a, 20% price cut in the space of a year. And I imagine that will continue to decline because next year we're going to be seeing 1440p 360Hz OLEDs. We're going to be seeing 4K 240Hz OLEDs. And if they're debuting around, $1,500, $1,000 to $1,500, that's going to have to mean those existing models get cheaper. So yeah, I'd imagine over time we will see the other tech capitulate in pricing, but then there'll always be space for people that want to have, mini LED monitors. They want a 4K resolution without having to deal with, sub-pixel issues and things like that, or burn-in. So I think, yeah, that would make a lot of sense for some people. So you're still going to see both tech, but yeah, OLED is certainly going to be pushing down in price quite a bit there. Micro LED, is it true that the technology will have the benefits of OLED without burn-in issues, and when products are estimated to hit the market? Well, people are always saying with micro LED that it's like a few years away. So if it was a few years away a few years ago, then it should be coming out now, but it's still a few years away. So I'm not sure I'd be taking too much stock in that sort of estimation from people developing those products. They still haven't really been able to miniaturize it down to even TV size yet. So until it gets to TV size, it's probably not going to be coming to monitors anytime soon. I think with the burn-in thing, I'm not 100% convinced that micro LED will solve burn-in issues. That's because micro LED is supposed to have individual illumination along with every single pixel, but using more of an LED type of panel. So it's really like shrinking the LED, the mini LED that we have today down more, so you get more zones and things like that. There is still the potential that each of those zones would wear out. So I'd have to do a bit more research to see exactly what they're claiming there in terms of how they would deal with that sort of thing. Because really the reason why LCDs don't burn in is because you've got one backlight. The backlight wears evenly across the lifespan of the monitor. But if you start varying different areas of the panel and using them at different rates, then you're going to see different levels of burn-in, different levels of use, which does cause burn-in. So yeah, we'll see. Obviously with micro LED, I guess some of the talk of that tech is that the LEDs that they're using for the illumination are much more robust than an OLED. So the lifespan would theoretically be longer. But then there's still the potential that you would get burn-in after a certain period of time. So anyway, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Not 100% sure on that. I bought the $1,000 4K QN90C TV. Is the Neo G7 43 the same panel? I've seen the Neo G7 go as low as $500. Little buyer's remorse. So I'm not super familiar with the TV market. So first of all, take my answer here with a grain of salt. I do believe that the two panels are very similar, so that they're using similar-ish technology. You may see different features, of course, between TV and monitor. So that's a potential aspect. Obviously, the TV could have, for example, more and only HDMI ports. The monitor has DisplayPort. That's something to consider. So yeah, I'd probably have a little buyer's remorse if I bought one for $1,000 and the Neo G7 43 is $500. I don't think the Neo G7 43 was a great monitor, though. So would I recommend it at $500? I'm not sure. It's certainly a lot better than $1,000. So yeah, I'd sort of be looking at ratings that probably have a good breakdown of exactly what the QN90C is. If you look at their review and you see similar characteristics to what we looked at in our monitor review, so like contrast the same, mini LED backlight has the same number of zones, response times are similar, it's probably pretty similar. So that's probably how I would tackle looking at that. I recently got the Odyssey Neo G7 32-inch based on your review. Turns out to be the perfect for my use case, so cheers for that. I paid $950 US a couple of months ago, and it is $850 US on Amazon right now. Seems like a good deal. Yeah, great to hear, Russell, that you got a good experience with that monitor. I think it is still a great monitor today. Recently in our recommendations, I was sort of hedging with people, do you want to wait and see what OLED's going to bring in early 2024, or do you want to buy now? Obviously, if you're buying now, the Neo G7 is something I'd still recommend. And for $850 US, yeah, it's a pretty good price. So hard to complain about that. So yeah. Okay. What else have we got here? Thanks everyone for those super chats. I think I'm up to date with those at the moment. So yeah, we've gotten to all of those. Let's see what other people are saying in here. Right, here's a good question. Is the contrast ratio so bad on the 27GP850 for dark room, low light room, and can a 3070 run 1440p? Because I still have a 3070 in my build, but I heard this monitor has a very low contrast ratio. So yeah, if you're using this in a dark room, you probably will notice the raised black levels. It's not super noticeable in a bright room. It really depends on your lighting environment. But in a dark room, relative to a higher contrast IPS monitor, so if you had the two side by side, you had the 27GP850 at like 750, 800 to 1, and you had 1,000 to 1 or even 1,200 to 1 IPS. Some of those do exist. You will notice a pretty significant difference because we're talking like a 30, 40% improvement. I don't have a calculator in front of me to do that math, but it'll be something around there in improvement. So it will look darker, and that can even affect things like your IPS glow. Like high contrast monitors tend to hide the IPS glow a little better. So 3070, yeah, that's no problem with 1440p for some games, obviously. But the 27GP850, if your primary use case is dark room, low light gaming, then I'd probably buy an alternate monitor around a similar price if I was buying something new. And as I talked about earlier in the stream, products like the M27QP are actually a little cheaper than the 27GP850. You do sacrifice the pure response time speed, but the M27QP is 1,000 to 1 or 1,013 to 1 to be specific in our testing. What other monitors have we got here? If you do get a 240 hertz monitor, the G274QPX is a pretty good contrast ratio as well. Pretty high contrast ratio there. So those are some of the sort of options that you can get with a better contrast ratio. But I'll be targeting over 1,000 to 1, especially if that's sort of around your price point. What else we got here? Switching from PG279QM to PG27AQN or PG27AQDM worth it? I only play Apex, caps at 300 FPS. If yes, should I go for AQN or AQDM or wait for next-gen OLED? Right, so PG279QM, that's ASUS's 240Hz 1440p monitor. And both of those upgrades to the AQN, which is their 360Hz IPS, or the AQDM, which is their 240Hz OLED. So many monitor names, very, very similar. Is that going to be worth it? For Apex Legends, the advantage of OLED, you do get the better response times over the QM, but the QM is still quite fast. So things will appear a little clearer on the OLED at the same refresh rate. So it'd be like a same refresh rate swap there to the OLED. But Apex, would you be playing that with HDR enabled? I probably wouldn't. I mean, I'm not super familiar with Apex Legends gaming, but being a multiplayer competitive game, HDR has the potential to make it harder to play and make you at a competitive disadvantage. That's what I tend to have noticed. The brightness differences tends to make it a little harder to see enemies, things like that. So, unless you were getting that for the speed and the HDR experience, I probably wouldn't consider that worth it. Especially because you already have a 240 hertz monitor. But if you had let me just check, that definitely is a 240 hertz monitor, right? Because if that was 144 hertz, then you would be getting a pretty significant upgrade. But no, it is the 240 hertz version. So not worth it. PG27AQN. So that's both faster in terms of response times and has the 360 hertz refresh rate and has ULMB2. So from my perspective, that probably is more along the lines of what I would go for. The backlight strobing technology for Apex is probably going to be pretty good. You can run at 300 FPS, no problems. Even if you don't utilize the 360 hertz, the 300 hertz plus strobing will be an advantage over the QM. I don't remember if the QM had backlight strobing. I think it didn't, or if it did, it certainly wasn't at the level of the AQN. I'd probably go for the AQN. I think next gen OLED, you could get like a 360 hertz 1440p OLED. They're expected to come out next year, but then again, you're sort of going, 300 FPS. It's not that much of an upgrade. Maybe the fast response times again, and you probably wouldn't get backlight strobing on that sort of product. So that's probably another consideration there. AQN though, great product for that type of gaming. You're pretty much exactly the type of buyer that would benefit from that. Hi, Tim. Thoughts on Alienware's AW2723DF? So lots of people have been recommending that I check out this monitor. So let's get this back up on the good old Dell website and we can have a look. So this is their 1440p 240 hertz monitor. Am I going to do Dell's feedback survey? No, thank you. So yes, I believe this uses I think it's an LG panel, not 100% sure about that. It overclocks up to 280 hertz, which is an advantage there. And this is the Australian price, $700. I believe in the US it's more like $500. So I imagine this would be a pretty reasonable monitor, just based on what I've heard from various other testing sources and things like that, although I haven't tested it myself. If you were looking at this and you wanted a product that I have tested and know to be good, the Asus XG27AQMR is a 300 hertz 1440p monitor at a similar price right now in the US, around that $500 US range. That is a really well-tuned monitor, works quite well as sort of a premium 240 hertz monitor. I know that that's a good monitor. This one, again, if you see from other reviews that it's good, again, they're saying fast IPS, fast IPS nano color. Again, that could be like a different sort of panel than nano IPS. But anyway, I imagine it to be reasonable, but again, I haven't tested it, so I can't really say too much about exactly how it performs. Do you think there will be growth in flat panel 21:9 ultra-wide glossy displays to improve viewing angles and issues with rectilinear projection? 21:9 being flat, we've seen some of that with like the IPS versions, so like your IPS ultra-wides. Glossy, unlikely. Monitor manufacturers are not fans of Glossy. The general most buyers want matte screens for use in a variety of lighting conditions. Glossy, I know a lot of people love Glossy. I love Glossy for some use cases as well, but it has its disadvantages for some use cases, which is why most panels are matte. But anyway, not expecting there to be too many more, flat panel with Glossy. Can't see that happening. Flat panel 21.9 ultrawide potentially. And yeah, I think there are good use cases for that for people who need a lot of width but are doing primarily productivity work. So I think something like that is, we're going to see more of those because they obviously are still making them. But yeah, maybe not to the exact spec that you would like there. Where would you go next from a budget 1440p 165 Hz monitor? It served me well, but I want a visual pop for my next monitor with 165 Hz or higher. So yeah, good question. I think if you've got 1440p 165 Hz right now, and I'm assuming this is a non-HDR monitor, then there's a couple of ways to go here. You could go 240 Hz, so increase the refresh rate. You could switch over to 4K to get a resolution upgrade, or you could go for a true HDR product. But because you've originally bought a budget 1440p monitor, I think it's pretty questionable about whether a true HDR monitor would be in your price range at the moment. Even the monitors I haven't quite tested yet, those are around like $500 US. If you've bought budget, probably still a bit out of your price range with that sort of thing. So yeah, if you want visual pop, then HDR would spring out to me. But you're going to have to spend like $800 US right now for something that's OLED. So that's probably out of the question, but that would be sort of maybe a wait and see type of thing, like wait until OLED gets cheaper, then go for that. 240 Hz, if you're playing competitive games, I think that provides a decent upgrade. So that's another thing to consider. And those monitors are very cheap at the moment. We've seen as low as $300. Someone told me the 27GR83Q was like $300 earlier. Pretty good price for that. So that's obviously an upgrade, but it's not going to give you visual pop necessarily. It's going to be more of like a motion clarity sort of improvement, and it would depend on whether you can run games in that refresh rate. Depending on what budget monitor you've got, the response times may not be that much better. And then 4K obviously has its own set of things as well. So yeah. Right, Damien says, I just got the 540 Hz Asus and I'm having a couple of problems. I got an artifact when I used the overclock mode down the middle. So I'm not sure if there's more to this question because you've only listed one problem there, but I'm just going to assume that this is a major problem. When you use the overclock mode with the line down the middle, I'd return that monitor because you spent like $1,000 on it. Very expensive. Send in the monitor, get a replacement. The overclock mode's always, questionable whether the overclock mode is like an advertised feature or whether they're trying to get out of, let's say you've got like a bottom 5% monitor in terms of its capabilities out of that batch and you've got issues with that mode. The overclock potentially allows them to, it's an overclock. You can't expect it to go well. I think that's crap. I think if they're advertising 540 Hertz, it's 540 Hertz. If you can't run it at 540 Hertz, return it. Similar to like, dead pixels. Again, I think dead pixels are unacceptable. So it doesn't really, at least from my perspective, I don't think it matters what the warranty says, what the return policy says. I would at least attempt a return on that product and see what they say. And then, send us some angry emails or something if it doesn't go your way. Thoughts on Red Magic's upcoming mini LED monitor with 5,088 zones, 2200 nits? Seems pretty interesting. I'd probably look towards importing that. I think depends on, I don't think Red Magic sold monitors in Australia before, so that would be like an import level sort of thing. There's obviously question marks over 5,088 zones. Does that mean that there's 5,088 individual LEDs, or is it individually controllable at 5,000 zones? Because we've seen some products in the past, they've said, hey, we've got 5,000 mini LEDs, but then it's only, a much lower level of zones, like 1,000 zones or something. So yeah, I'll be interested to see whether their marketing claims for that monitor hold up. But typically when we see monitors with things like this, like Red Magic has this 5,000 zone monitor with high levels of brightness, those panels have to come from somewhere. It's pretty likely those panels will be used in other products as well at some point. So there's always the chance that you'll have a Red Magic option, you'll have a different option to go with, and things like that. So that's probably what I would go with. So yeah, we'll see. I'll try buy one though. I will try. Samuel asks, $280 for the LG 27GP83B or $260 for the MSI G274 QPF-QD. trying to pick between these two to pair with my RTX 4080. All right, let me go to my spreadsheet here that's got all these monitors in it, and we can give you some more detailed performance information about this. So I'm just filtering them so I can see exactly what's going on here. Let's get both of these in here. Okay, so typically from what I remember from testing these products, the MSI model is not as well tuned for motion compared to the LG monitor. You're more likely to get a single overdrive mode experience with the LG. However, overall performance, so if we're looking at like response times, cumulative deviation and things like that, the GP83B has 534 cumulative deviation average. The MSI model is at, where is that in this chart? Is that even in this chart? Yes, here it is, 579. So not much of a difference there. That's just average performance. And we're talking about 4.8 milliseconds with 20% inverse ghosting versus 9 milliseconds with no inverse ghosting. So, obviously you may see 9 milliseconds versus 4.5 as being a huge difference, but the LG monitor also has a lot more overshoot. So it's just going to depend on the sort of preferences that you have, whether it's, do I want slightly faster, but, more potential for artifacts, slightly slower with no potential for artifacts. The difference is there. Yeah, the LG is obviously better tuned, but the MSI isn't that far behind. The main differences that I would see as well for those sorts of products would be things like contrast ratio. The MSI model doesn't have great contrast. It's still below 1,000:1, but the LG monitor is more like 800:1. So the MSI does have an advantage there. Brightness is pretty similar. The MSI as well has the higher color gamut. So you're looking at 80% Rec 2020 instead of 75%. So that gives you a little more in Adobe RGB. If that's important to you, not sure if it is. It's not going to be important if you're not thinking of doing productivity work on it. And the MSI model, again, like its color performance, out of the box, the MSI model and LG pretty similar. sRGB mode pretty similar. So they're pretty similar monitors all up. I think the main consideration there would be, the response time tuning. Do you want better tuning or worse tuning, slightly worse tuning? Or do you want better contrast ratio or slightly worse contrast ratio? And at that price, $260 versus $280 is not much in it. I'd probably get the MSI because it's cheaper, and I'd personally prefer the contrast. But either way, I think you'll be getting a good monitor. It could even come down to things like the design of the product and its additional features in that area. If I want a flat 4K 165 to 240 hertz OLED monitor, 32 inches or less, whatever price, what should I get? So if this is an old question, or if there's anything announced that I should wait for. So if you want flat 4K 240 hertz OLED, 32 inches or less, that product doesn't exist right now. So you're going to have to be waiting until, I'm thinking probably, again, I've heard like January or February for some of those 4K OLED monitors of next year. So whether or not that turns out to be accurate, I'm still not 100% sure, but we should be seeing a lot more of those at CES. There's even some that have been announced from MSI, Asus, Dell, various different options there. So I'd definitely wait. I wouldn't be getting like an IPS that's attempting to do OLED performance if that's what you're interested in. We're not that far away from January, February. So I would definitely be waiting for those sorts of products. I'd be expecting them to be pretty expensive though. So if you're not willing to set aside $1,500, $2,000, again, this is just a guess. I actually don't know what those monitors will cost. But yeah, $1,500 I think is a pretty safe bet that I'd be saving up for that sort of product. So check back CES 2023. You'll see a lot more stuff based on those sorts of panels. I grabbed a LG 32GP750 for $380. What are your thoughts on this monitor? See, I haven't tested this monitor. I believe that this is the lower cost version of the, what was it? The 32GP850 or whatever. There's like a new version with a new panel. I think that's a pretty good price for what you're looking at. Again, those sorts of LG monitors, just based on recent LG testing from those ranges, they've had pretty good tuning and things like that. They tend to give you features like sRGB mode, things like that. And I think if you're buying a 32-inch 1440p 165 hertz monitor and you're getting it for around 380 Canadian, which would probably convert to a little lower for USD. I think they're right now about 270 US. That's a pretty good price. I don't think you'll find too many complaints with that. But again, that's just based on me not having tested that product. Just a general overview of the specifications, the likely panels that they'd be using, which are reasonable quality at the moment, and LG's, sort of what we've seen from them, from this latest generation from them. Nori asks, why are we still stuck on DisplayPort 1.4 on a lot of monitors? DP 1.4 has become mainstream in 2017. This is insane. Only I can save us. I don't think I can save us. I think one of the key things with DisplayPort 1.4 is that when it came out, there wasn't a lot of use of DSC at the time. And since then, we've seen a lot more use of display stream compression, which has really extended the life of that port. So when it came out, it did actually have quite impressive bandwidth for the time. It wasn't really needed in a lot of use cases. Right now, though, it's needed with DSC to hit the highest resolution and refresh rate. So when we've got DP 1.4, it still is usable for things like, I think you can even do like 4K 240 hertz with display stream compression. Now, some people don't like DSC. It's incompatible with a few NVIDIA features, for example. Fair enough. But I think, it's still reasonably usable. And the reason why I don't think we've seen as many of the DisplayPort 2.1 products is there's not a lot of source devices that use DP that's higher than 1.4 at the moment. We've got the AMD Radeon 7000 series that uses DP 2.1, but that's not even the highest bandwidth version of DP 2.1. It's only the UHBR, I think it's UHBR 13.5 standard. Those acronyms are horrible, but whatever it is, the slightly lower spec, not the full 80 gigabits per second. It's the version down from that, which is still a big upgrade, but we just haven't seen the monitors that actually require DP 2.1 just yet. Because even if they don't need to use, even if they do need more than DP 1.4, HDMI 2.1 can provide the bandwidth necessary. So I imagine we'll see more products improving that soon. Best 4K monitor, no compromises both for console and PC. I have the Neo G8 at the moment, but wanted to stay within the 32-inch or smaller. If you have the Neo G8, you've got a pretty good product as is. You're looking at 4K, 32-inch VA panel, good response times, HDR with mini LED. The Neo G8, again, I had a few issues with my unit and the scan lines and things at the highest refresh rate, so that's maybe a consideration to an upgrade. But you've got a pretty good product, let's be honest. You've got a pretty good product. I don't see much reason to upgrade that at the moment. I think if you're talking like no compromises for both console and PC, every monitor has compromises, right? Because I could sit here and say, wait for an OLED monitor in early 2024, but then you're talking about burn-in. You're talking about what's the pixel layout going to be? Is it going to be bright enough for some use cases? I think it probably could be a no compromises experience for, let's say, gaming, especially console PC gaming. You probably get a pretty good experience there. But if you're talking about like productivity at the same time, I'm not sure. Is that going to be something that's suitable for you? I'm not sure. I think we're still way away from what I personally would class no compromises. But yeah, Neo G8, Neo G7, good products at the moment. Not sure I'd consider an upgrade just yet. And thanks, Matt, for the super chat there. Hi, Tim. I have a VA 1080p 24-inch. I want a 27-inch IPS 1440p, at least 144 hertz. I am short, and with my setup, I'm worried about viewing angles, budget around $400. So I assume that's $400 US. I'm short. That's an interesting point to make here. I think with most monitors, you do have height adjustment. So viewing angles, I probably wouldn't recommend for most people if you're like really short that you would, be viewing it flat. You can tilt it and things like that, and obviously you have it lower down. Height adjustment does go pretty low on most monitors. So if you've got like a desk, you're not super tall at your desk. Again, most of those products will be pretty fine. And yeah, an upgrade from a VA 1080p 24-inch, you're going to be getting a pretty significant upgrade to 27-inch 1440p 144 hertz. If you have around $400, you could even get 240 hertz at the moment, and that's probably where I'd be looking at. Your sort of choices would be like, do I go $250 and get 1440p 140, 165 hertz, that sort of range? So things like MSI, Gigabyte, LG have good monitors in that range. Our recent best of monitors videos will go into depth on those sorts of things. But if you're talking about $400, you definitely want to spend $400. You can get like Gigabyte M27QX. You can get apparently the LG 27G83Q on a discount. You can get the MSI G274QPX. I think that's what it's called, the MSI G274QPX. Anyway, those monitors, good products, would recommend them as a good upgrade there. All of them have good viewing angles. IPS, not really an issue with viewing angles, so I think you'd be pretty set there. AWDWF for $900 versus the Odyssey G9 Neo 49-inch for $1,500 for work and gaming, 60/40, so more work than gaming. So I'm assuming the G9 Neo, you're talking about the VA LCD version of that product, which I think is 2000 mini LED zones, 5120 by 1440 or whatever it is for $1,500. RTX 2080 Trio on work laptops. So you're going to have a few issues here with these sort of configurations. So the RTX 2080 isn't going to be the most powerful GPU to run the resolution of the Neo G9 for gaming. So that is a potential consideration there. The DWF being a lower resolution because it's less wide is going to be a bit easier to run on RTX 2080. The difference there, though, the pricing as well. If I was primarily gaming, definitely get the DWF for $900 because it's got an OLED panel, faster, has not as much of the issues with firmware and things as the G9 had. But then again, you're saying you're using it for work 60% of the time, so there is the risk of burn in there, even though the DWF has a burn-in warranty. So the Neo G9 could be an option for $1,500. You're talking about $600 more, though. So you could almost buy a DWF, save the $600, and then when it burns in from your work usage, just buy another one. So as silly as that recommendation sounds, like the price gap is almost at the level where you could do that. And even then, you supposedly do have a 3-year burn-in warranty. So I'd probably get the DWF based on that, just with that price difference, though. If you did find the Neo G9 closer in price, that may swing me over to the other way. So we've got a non-monitor question here. So I'm not 100% sure whether I'll be answering that in this video, but that's probably something to ask on Hardware Unbox next time, Haywood. Thank you for your super chat, though. Do you know of any monitors that have good support for picture-by-picture in portrait orientation, as in stacked 9x8 outputs? Not something I test heaps of in monitors, and one of the things I often find with those picture-by-picture or picture-in-picture is as soon as you turn them on, you massively increase your input latency and you significantly reduce your refresh rate capabilities. So it makes it a lot less likely that you're going to be getting things like, let's say you buy a 240 hertz monitor, picture by picture could be like 60 hertz, which is often not very good. And that's certainly been my experience testing those features on a lot of monitors. So unfortunately, it's not something I've spent a lot of time looking at because often the modes just aren't that good. So yeah, you're probably going to have to dig in and really find the specifications of like which products will do that at a good quality refresh rate and not sacrificing things, not drastically increasing input latency. I know there's a few that can do like 120 hertz, but even those are, questionable. Blue asks, would you recommend the LG 32GQ950 for $700 US? I'm upgrading from an old S2716DG through hardware G-Sync on the panel is nice to pair with the 4090. So yeah, hardware G-Sync obviously nice. These days though, with monitors, you'll be getting your adaptive sync variable refresh rate regardless of whether you get G-Sync specifically or FreeSync or G-Sync compatible or whatever. So for $700 US, I think that's a pretty good price. I think because we're talking about the 4K one. So I think for $700 US, that's pretty good because I was just looking the other day. Let's have a look over here at some PC part picker stuff. I was looking at the 32GP, what is it? GR93U. So this is the other option that you can get for, it's down as low as $600, but it was $700. So these are the two options, pretty similar. I think the GQ model has a slightly better panel. So in terms of its like tuning, a little bit better brightness. In fact, I can probably check this out in my other spreadsheet over here. Let me just get this configured for 4K. And we've got all the refresh rates there. Let's get this up to 32 inches for us. Okay, so the GQ versus the GRU. Cumulative deviation is pretty similar. So performance pretty similar. Again, yeah, the GQ, so this model is a little faster, probably slightly better tuned just based on the numbers I'm looking at here. The GRU is the better calibrated monitor, slightly, though it does depend on whether you're talking out of the box or sRGB mode. So the GRU has the better sRGB mode, so that's something to consider. Again, very similar panels, so things like contrast ratio, brightness, they're going to be pretty similar. The GQ950 does sort of have HDR performance, but it's edge lit. So whether or not that's like a big consideration for you is, questionable. But I think at the same price, I probably would get the GQ. So I think that's a pretty good price. It is going to work fine with your 4090. It's 4K, 144 hertz. I would recommend it, especially because back when I tested it, it was like, you see these prices here, $1,300 US. That's a terrible price for that monitor. $600, $700, great price. So I think that's where I'd see that. I bought a Gigabyte M27QX 27-inch 240Hz. Did I waste money? No, absolutely not. That's a great monitor. It's been at a great price in a lot of regions for a long time now. It's good to see it's back in stock. Still highly recommend it. It performs pretty similarly to the MSI, and the LG monitor is a little better, but the MSI that I've recently been talking about, very similar in its performance. And there are some monitors. I looked at an Acer recently that was a low-cost 240Hz option that wasn't very good. So at least you've got a good monitor. So it depends on how much you spent, of course, but I think you've got a good buy there. Hi, Tim. Just got an RX 7900 XTX for €750. I wonder what monitor to pair it with, something with good colors, brightness, at least 144 to 180 Hertz. Really depends on your budget there. So if you spent €750 and you don't have heaps left over, then, 1440p, 165 Hertz is probably going to be your jam, sort of those lower cost entry-level monitors. And even a lot of those today will do 400 nits. They'll have reasonable contrast. And, things like the MSI version that I was talking about, the G274 QPF-QD, that has a really wide color gamut. So if you want that, I personally prefer accuracy, so I would use things like sRGB mode. But if you want the super saturation, the extra saturation from the super wide color gamut, then that's something to consider. But if you have a lot more money to spend and you're willing to go for things like 4K, you're willing to consider OLED, then obviously there's plenty of OLED options that are good. And for 4K monitors, again, we were just talking about things like the 32GR93U, which I think in Europe is pretty well priced from memory. I just did a European buying guide on Monitors Unboxed. That was a good price. So 32GQ950 as well. There's a few other monitors that we've looked at in the past. I don't know if the Lenovo Legion Y32P30 is available in Europe, but that's another good monitor. There obviously are some other products that aren't quite as capable as those that are sort of older that I probably wouldn't consider. So yeah, I mean, you've got a 7900 XTX, so it's going to be good for things like 4K gaming. It's going to be good for HDR gaming. It's going to be good for like 1440p 240 Hertz. So it really just depends on your budget there. Those are the sorts of types of monitors I'd be considering. Hi, Tim. Just bought a 27GR93 for $450 over the prior gen 27GP95R for $400. Did I waste $50? Color accuracy is important for me. HDR not as much. That's a really good price for the 27GR93U from memory, because that's a 4K monitor, and I think it's supposed to be around $500 US, but even the MSRP is more like, let me have a look. I think the MSRP it's $800 here in Australia. What about the US? $500 US. So if you got it for $450, you have got a reasonable discount. I haven't tested the 27GP95R, so there's going to be, obviously I'm not going to be able to tell you too much about how that performs. Color accuracy, though, is pretty good from this monitor from memory. The more recent monitors that we've seen from LG, let me just have a look at the spreadsheet here, 27GR93U. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Contrast ratio is pretty similar. Brightness is high. So sort of similar performance to the GP950, things like that. Yeah, color accuracy is okay. Performance is good. It's well tuned. That was one of the positives of that review as well. So color accuracy, yeah, I think you got a pretty good deal there. The 27GP950, yeah, I think they're probably pretty similar. Did you waste $50? I'm not sure. It depends what you're sort of valuing, because they are slightly different. So if it's things like speed, again, color accuracy is pretty similar. It's probably not something I'd be getting super caught up on. If you need more brightness, then that more recent LG is probably good. So yeah, either way, I think you've done all right there with those sorts of prices, and you've certainly got a discount over it was $700 MSRP, and now it's $500 on sale, so you've got an extra $50 off. So yeah, I think that's not too bad. Thanks, Mark, for the super chat as well. Bullish asks, hi, Tim, what do you think about the Gigabyte M27QX 27-inch 240 Hertz? I have a 7900 XTX. Should I return it and go with the 4K? No, I don't think so. But it depends on what sort of gaming you do. If you're talking about single-player gaming, I mean, at the same price, you're probably only looking at like an entry-level 27-inch 4K 144 hertz monitor. So it could even be something like this. Not this is necessarily entry-level, it's a mid-range price, but the closer to the entry part of the range of these specifications. So yeah, I don't think so. I think 240 hertz, the performance from your 7900 XTX is going to give you 240 hertz level of performance at 1440p. The difference in resolution for gaming, it depends on the games you play. I don't think it's a massive improvement at that size. So if you're going like from your M27QX to something like this on the LG monitor, I don't think it's a big difference in terms of resolution for gaming, especially for single player games. You might get a little bit more out of the 4K monitor, but for competitive games, 240 hertz will be a lot better. So yeah, it just depends. I personally wouldn't return it. I think it's a good monitor, and especially if you've got it at a good price, then that would make a lot of sense to me. But again, you could go either way. So it just really depends on, and again, it depends on what's available in your region, right? Because if you can't even get something, the M27U, for example, is still probably more expensive than the M27QX. M28U, again, is probably more expensive. So if you're talking about returning it and buying a more expensive monitor, I'm not sure if that's what I'd personally be doing. The M27QX is a good product. So, yeah. Will an i5-8400 bottleneck me at 4K with a 7900 XTX? Probably. I'd probably be considering a CPU upgrade at that point. I think that was related to the previous question that I didn't answer. Upgrade to an i9-9900? Nah, I would. You say you've got an RTX, yeah. Considering RX, yeah, if you're considering an RX 7900 XTX, I would personally upgrade the CPU first, but that's just me. Especially if you get a platform upgrade, then you can do things. But anyway, we'll get back to monitors. Bought an MSI Optics MAG274 QRF-QD, from which I added an Alienware AW3423 DWF. Do you think that's enough to play action RPG games? So Diablo 4, Path of Exile, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm assuming that you've got both of these monitors, but you could also be meaning an upgrade from the MSI to the Alienware. I think either way, yeah, that monitor is going to be really good for your action RPG games. I played Diablo 4 on my Alienware AW3423DW. Plays really nice on that sort of monitor. Again, those games, I'm most familiar with D4, which I assume means Diablo 4. You don't necessarily need the high performance of OLED. The HDR in that game is okay, but it's nothing too crazy. But obviously it's an ultra-wide, so you're getting a bit more space there to view the game world. And as an upgrade from the MAG274 QRF-QD, I mean, you've gone for better HDR performance, better response times. You're getting, what else? All the OLED benefits, deeper blacks. It's a bigger monitor. It's got more screen real estate. Yeah, I think that's a really good choice. And the DWF, as we've talked about a lot through this live stream, is a really good price at the moment. So if that's the sort of thing that you're thinking of, then yeah, I would certainly add that. And yeah, enough to play action RPG games. Yeah, it's going to be pretty good because you're going to have that monitor. You can put the MSI monitor off to the side as a secondary monitor for, other sorts of content. But yeah, action RPG works really well on those sorts of monitors. Is a 50-50 productivity and gaming split too risky for burn-in on one of the many 34-inch OLED monitors? Any of the IPS alternatives worth it then? I mean, the performance difference between the OLED, the QD OLED ultrawides, and like the IPS ultrawides is pretty large because a lot of the IPS ultrawides don't even offer true HDR. So it's not like there's the mini LED version versus the OLED version, although there are some VA monitors, I think, that have mini LED functionality. Not super familiar with them because I haven't tested them, but I believe there's a few of them. But most of the time, if you're talking IPS alternative, you're downgrading from like HDR. Obviously, performance is going to be lesser. Refresh rate's probably lesser as well. It is going to be cheaper though. But for productivity gaming split, 50-50, is that too much? Potentially. It depends what productivity you're talking about as well. Because if you're talking about an application where you can use it in dark mode, it doesn't have a lot of taskbars that are bright and are going to burn in over time if things are moving around a lot, like you're moving between screens in your productivity app and you're changing things up. Like, for example, one moment you might, let's even just use apps as an example. If you're like one moment you've got Excel open, then you're switching windows and you're going to have Chrome open. All of these are in dark mode and you're going to switch to like a coding app and things like that. There's still a risk of burn-in, but it's going to be less than if you were using an app that was, always bright, big white panels, big taskbars that are always in the same position, that's going to burn in your monitor much more quickly, especially with a 50-50 split. You may even see burn-in after, I don't know, you can check out like the Arting's burn-in test that goes through and has a look at how many hours something on screen will take until it burns in. But if you're talking about like 8 hours, again, 50-50. So let's say 4 hours a day of productivity, 4 hours a day of gaming. It's risky. It's risky. But then again, a lot of those 34-inch OLED monitors do come with burn-in warranties. So if you get the Alienware model, for example, comes with a 3-year burn-in warranty. I think the MSI model as well has a burn-in warranty. Not sure. I know the Samsung model doesn't. So with a burn-in warranty, you may just have that peace of mind where you can buy it, and if it does burn in, theoretically you can get a replacement. But if you're not going crazy with brightness, you're using dark mode, you're minimizing taskbars, you're sort of considering how you're using it, there is that possibility that it is a good buy. But it just depends, like what's available, the pricing, can you get the burn-in warranty, and things like that. Would an esports player benefit from a high-end TN 165Hz panel with a G-Sync module more than a high-end 240Hz IPS panel with adaptive sync? Probably not. If you're talking about esports gaming, again, TN, it really depends what type of TN you're talking about. If you're talking about a TN monitor that's got really good backlight strobing, which are some of them, then the combination of the response times and the strobing may mean that you'll have the best motion clarity on the TN versus the IPS 240Hz monitor that doesn't have backlight strobing. So I think there's some BenQ TN monitors around that refresh rate that would give you backlight strobing of good quality. And then you can, you get better motion clarity than 240Hz at that sort of refresh rate. 240Hz though will have your lower input latency. IPS panel will give you better viewing angles. So with the TN, obviously you're going to need to make sure you're viewing it dead on. With IPS, you can be a bit more flexible in your viewing position, which is going to give you that advantage for 240Hz. But the adaptive sync versus G-Sync module comparison probably doesn't make too much of a difference these days. The G-Sync module in the monitor will just ensure you're getting things like variable overdrive, that you're getting things like better color tuning, because NVIDIA tends to certify monitors to be a bit better tuned, but on a TN monitor, how much of a difference is that going to be? So yeah, I think the G-Sync versus adaptive sync, not too much of an issue. You're really going to have to toss up between, can I get backlight strobing on the TN, or is it just the refresh rate difference? Because if it's just the refresh rate difference, no backlight strobing difference, then the 240Hz IPS will probably be a little bit clearer, a little bit smoother, and have lower latency, which is going to be all good for esports gaming. So just do the research on what sort of monitors are available there, what sort of TN we're talking about, what sort of IPS we're talking about, and make a decision from there, I think. Salvation asks, Asus OLED PG27AQDM versus LG 4K Nano IPS 27GP95R versus the Odyssey G9 for AAA games. Right, so you're talking, these are very different monitors. We're talking OLED versus just your standard 4K IPS LCD versus the Odyssey G9, which is the ultra-wide. Now, you could mean the OLED G9, you could mean the regular G9, you could mean the Neo G9, but you said G9, so I'm going to assume you mean the VA ultra-wide, the 49-inch one for AAA games. So the Odyssey G9 feels a little not quite cutting-edge technology these days, although I could probably check what price it's at, because it could be at a really low price. Come to think of it, let me have a look. Odyssey G9, they're even selling them? Oh, no, they're still selling them. Yeah, still selling them. Priced at $900, although not too many other retailers there, and that's just on Amazon, so who knows. For that price, probably wouldn't be worth it, I don't think, up against the OLED PG27 AQDM. We're talking about a fairly different format. Obviously, super ultra-wide versus just 27-inch 16:9. I would go the OLED. Much better for HDR. The G9 doesn't have HDR at all. 240Hz. The OLED is also 240Hz. The OLED's pretty similar in price. The PG27 AQDM, I've seen it as low as $900 US, more like $1,000 US. I know you put your super chat in euros, so you have to check that in your Euro nation to see exactly the price difference there. I'd get the OLED there. The LG 4K Nano IPS 27GP95R. Again, we've talked previously in the stream about do I go 1440p OLED versus 4K? What's the difference between 4K, 1440p? I think for AAA games, you'd be better off with HDR at 1440p at the higher refresh rate than you would be with the 4K So higher resolution, but IPS, lack of HDR, and lower refresh rate. I think that's probably the way to go, at least the way I would go. But then if you're using your monitor occasionally for things like web browsing, the text clarity on the PG27 AQDM is not great. So if you have that like even 20% use case for productivity work, then that's maybe somewhere you'd not consider buying it. But of those choices, I by far would prefer the PG27 AQDM for those monitors. So yeah, I think that's that. For a 42-inch OLED, is LG the way to go, or are Samsung/Sony's 43 inches or others still competitive? So I think the Samsung and Sony 43-inch monitors are VA LCD, so it just depends on whether you specifically want OLED versus LCD. But I think Samsung has a 42-inch OLED as part of their monitor series, but your best source of information from that would be ratings that does test all the TVs, and you'll see the differences between like the Sony implementation of the LG's panel or the LG implementation of that panel. So yeah, I've heard quite good things about the Sony monitor, like the 42-inch version of their OLED, that it could even have a few performance benefits over the LG, but again, check reviews to make sure that what I'm saying there is correct. But yeah, I mean, the LGs, having been something that I've tested, are quite good. They obviously have a lot of features, strong feature set, large panel. They're giving you things like Dolby Vision. That's probably something I'd be considering because I know Samsung is a brand that does not support Dolby Vision. So while it's not super important for gaming, if you do want to stream Dolby Vision content from streaming services, Samsung typically only supports HDR10+, which isn't as widely supported as Dolby Vision in content from streaming services. So that would probably knock Samsung out of the race for HDR for me if it was like similar price, similar other features. Sony, I believe, does support Dolby Vision, but again, not 100% sure. Check that. And yeah, others. I mean, you can even at times find the more monitor versions of those 42-inch OLEDs on sale. Just depends on when you're looking. Things like the PG42UQ from Asus, for example, uses the same panel, switches out some of the HDMI ports for DisplayPort and things like that. But it is possible that you can find those on sales. And that's often because they are lesser known products. So people who are looking for TVs may not consider the 42-inch gaming monitors, but if you're more of a buying it for gaming, then you might find a good price for something like that. So that's just a consideration to make. The 43-inch VA panels, though, have not been super impressed with them across the years testing them. We recently tested the Samsung 43-inch VA LCD with mini LED, wasn't impressed with it. So OLED, I think, is a much better way to go if you're sort of after sort of higher end TV sort of size monitor for gaming. So yeah. All right. Lots of questions coming in. It's been good so far. All right. What else have we got here? Am I planning to review the Samsung Neo G9 57-inch 4K? Yes, I'll probably have to buy it. I've prioritized for now buying the OLED G9. Once I'm finished with that, I probably will attempt to buy the Neo G9 as well. They're not actually available in Australia yet. They're only under pre-order, which I think they'll start delivering those soon-ish. But yeah, Samsung, tried to get one from them. I've emailed them a few times. No response. Don't know what's going on there. But yeah, we'll try buy them in a future sort of thing there. All right. What else have we got here? Do you think upcoming QD OLED 360 Hz monitors will have better burn-in protection? I don't know about better burn-in protection. I think they'll still use the same OLED care features. So things like your screen shifting, logo detection dimming, screen refresh, screen pixel refresh, those sort of features. I think they'll be pretty similar there. The second generation QD OLED panel, I haven't heard anything to suggest that that's supposed to be better at burn-in compared to the first gen panels. So I would imagine that its longevity would be pretty similar. They do slightly change the sub-pixel out, so I guess it's a possibility. But I guess there hasn't been too much specific talk about that. But I think the key thing to look out for will really be the warranties. So if we see the first gen panels give a 3-year warranty, the second gen versions from various manufacturers, especially if it's like Dell, for example. So Dell are planning future QD OLED monitors. If they come out and they remove the 3-year warranty from their new monitors, that'll be a big sign that the 3-year warranty was like over-promising a little bit in terms of the burn-in there. But if they continue to offer the 3-year burn-in warranty, I think we'll probably have reasonably good peace of mind. They'll have had more data. They'll still be confident in offering that warranty. I think that'll be a good sign. And if they increase the warranty, even better. So I think a lot of those burn-in things for me really hinge on what are manufacturers willing to offer you as a consumer. Because as a consumer, you don't want them to just say on their advertising, this will last you 5 years. You want a manufacturer to put it on them to say, this will last you 5 years, and we're so confident it will last you 5 years that we're covering burn-in for 5 years. That's the guarantee that I'd be looking for. I think it's really important with these monitors, and I'll be hoping that the upcoming monitors do something similar to that with the future versions. And we will be seeing lots more of those things at CES in January. So I think Robert here in the chat said, any particular rumors, things to look forward to at CES in January? 4K OLED monitors almost certainly will be shown off there. I've been having a few chats with various manufacturers. Very much sounds like they will be there. I personally will not be at the show, but you will see announcements, probably some more firm information on pricing, release dates for those monitors at CES. So there should be lots more OLEDs there. Not sure about any of the other monitor categories at the moment. I imagine a lot of the focus will be OLED, but CES should be exciting from that front, plus a few other things if you're into PC hardware. Hey Tim, wondering if you looked into motion clarity with higher resolutions as well as higher refresh rates. I'm curious if there is any difference. So this is a hard question to answer because it depends on a few things. So with resolution, part of it can come down to, let's say, your pixel speed, like how quickly something is moving in terms of like how many pixels per second is it moving across the screen. You've got a higher resolution screen at the same pixel rate, it'll move across the screen slower because there's more pixels to get through. So if you're sort of comparing motion tests, it is possible on the higher resolution monitor that, you know, you will see slightly different things there because it has to move a bit faster. But generally, if we're talking about moving from one aspect, one position to another position at the same size and speed, the resolution doesn't make too much difference. That's because, again, you're sort of tracking the same, you know, you're making the same movement with your eyes to track it, which is going to give the same sort of blur associated with your eyes tracking the fixed object. So recently when we did that video looking at how does the refresh rate matter for motion clarity, it's all to do with the object's fixed on screen, your eyes are moving, your eyes moving when you have a fixed screen, you see blur just because you have your eyes move, something's fixed, it's blurry. That's just how it works. With, resolutions and things, the only consideration I'd be thinking of is things like, is the higher resolution making the items smaller? And therefore, is that changing the speed that they're moving or things like that? So if it's higher resolution and things like that are having an impact, then yes, there could be some motion differences. But if we're talking about, you know, the objects are moving at the same speed, you know, they're moving from one position to the other position, the pixel responses are going to be, you know, not too much of a different factor between those two things. And yeah, so that's sort of how I would see it and how I would expect those two things to play out. And I certainly haven't seen, you know, higher resolutions have too much impact on motion clarity when testing them in a fairly similar way. So yeah, that's sort of my answer there. But again, it's not something I've looked too in depth at. I know some people have talked about, you know, the resolution can make a difference there. Again, I probably need to look into it a bit closer. But that would sort of be my expectation as to like, would 4K give you better motion clarity than 1440p? Again, I'm not sure. But then again, I guess the image itself, now that I think about it, the image itself will be clearer because it's a higher resolution. So I guess there's the possibility at the same size, speed, moving of objects, you are actually getting more detail into your eyes. That's actually an interesting point that could be worth looking into a bit more there. Because yeah, the greater detail that you get in could potentially impact motion clarity. Something to look into there. I'll have a look at that at some point in the future. And yes, thanks Rob for the G9 57-inch review. Yes, that will cost me a fair bit of money because I believe they are $2,500 in Australia. Let me just look that up. I am still interested in looking at it. 2,700 AUD is the current going rate for those monitors. So like I said, I've bought the OLED G9. We'll be getting through that first. Then we'll sort of be assessing what the interest is on the G9. But I'm definitely hoping to get it. Hopefully Samsung will eventually, I don't know, respond to our emails. That'd be nice. but yeah, we'll see. We will see about that one. All right. Okay. So does the Samsung Odyssey G7 have good color? Depends what you mean by good color. It obviously has a good contrast ratio. If we're talking Odyssey G7, the VA version, because there's many different Odyssey G7 monitors now. They've sort of diluted that into IPS versions. There's the Neo G7 and stuff like that. But anyway, we're talking the original one, good contrast ratio. Its viewing angles are probably, I wouldn't say problematic, but not as good as you would get from an IPS, but it's curved, so that tends to make it a little bit better. And yeah, it's like wide gamut aspect is not amazing. Like I think it's only like 90 to 92% DCI-P3. The best monitors of today will be like 98%. But if you're not using it for wide gamut work all the time, it's not that important. I think the main issue though with the G7 back in the day, and I could probably actually look this up in my little chart here, just have to make sure I'm looking at 240 hertz monitors, was that its calibration out of the box was not amazing. And yeah, just having a look at that again, the out of the box calibration from my G7 unit was not good, not very good. The sRGB mode was not that well supported, but then there could have been firmware updates since then to improve that. So yeah, it is a good monitor from its the VA aspect, the deeper blacks than you'd see from an IPS. So yeah, not sure about that, but yeah, I think the 27-inch 1440p version is relatively affordable these days, so could be a reasonable option. Nick asks, hi Tim, have you noticed any OLED black smear in low brightness like some phones did? What about micro LED? Thanks for all you do. So micro LED, yeah, still, again, always seems like it's many years away with micro LED, so again, we haven't really tested that yet, so I don't really know how that would apply to various performance metrics. Again, who knows when that's coming. With OLED black smear at low brightness, I know that was an issue with phones because I imagine they're changing things like how much voltage they're applying to the display and things like that to run at low brightness. You want better efficiency. When running a display on a phone at low brightness, you want a big battery life saving. So I imagine they're doing some things there that could affect response times, making it appear a bit slower. I've tested OLEDs at a range of brightness levels, and I haven't really noticed too much of a performance difference at reasonable brightnesses, but I wouldn't say I've tested them at like 10 nits. But certainly in our testing, we've seen a lot of the dark transitions already being tested, so things like going from low black to slightly less black, dark gray to dark gray. I've tested all of that at sort of reasonable brightnesses and haven't seen too much smear in terms of like response time testing, haven't seen it too much in actual usage of those monitors. I use my OLED daily. I've just been playing games like Alan Wake, for example, which is a very dark game in some areas in the HDR mode, and haven't seen too much of black smear on that sort of OLED. I have seen more things like slight flickering and pulsing at lower brightness levels, especially for HDR content, just because the monitor is trying to deal with adaptive sync and darker content at the same time. Some types of content really trigger that, and that's something I'll probably be looking at a bit more in-depth with future OLED monitors, just finding those games where those things happen, testing them, making sure that it's really nice and stable there. But that's something that is possible. But yeah, black smear, don't think that's an issue with the desktop monitors I've seen, at least those I've seen so far, whether we're talking WOLED or QD-OLED. Should I match refresh/resolution for two monitors, or can I upgrade just one? I already have a 27-inch 1440p 144 hertz. So if you're talking Windows, having two different resolutions across your monitors with different display scaling factors is annoying. So as you move your window from one monitor to the other monitor, it'll have to resize it. It's a little slow. It's a bit janky how Windows does that at the moment. So that there is the possibility there that won't play nicely. The refresh rate difference, though, won't make too much of a difference. So long as you've got one monitor set up as your like primary adaptive sync gaming monitor, the other monitor can really be whatever refresh rate. Doesn't really matter too much. I tend to find that isn't a big consideration and works quite well. I've had plenty of setups myself where I've had monitors running at different refresh rates and it's largely been fine. The resolution thing is the more annoying thing from my perspective. So I typically like to have the resolutions matched with the same size and sort of display scaling so that Windows doesn't go all crazy on me. But it's not like it's a deal-breaking flaw. It certainly is still usable. It's just that little bit annoying for dragging things across the windows and things. It works a lot better if the resolutions are matched. But if you're talking about a big upgrade in your monitor and you're going to get something that's really a lot better, I wouldn't have that holding me back at all. Scott says, burn-in scares me with the current OLEDs. I've been looking at these two monitors to pair with my 4080. Which one should I buy? The 32GR93U, so that's a monitor I believe I've tested, and the Dell G3223Q, which is a monitor I have not tested. Let's have a look, see what the differences are, price differences. Make sure we get that in US dollars. Okay. Okay, so they're asking 600 US for the Dell monitor. The 32GR93U is like, from memory, very expensive in the US. Or maybe it was on discount to $700 lately. Let's have a look. So just get this set up here. All right, so this is the Dell monitor. 4K 144 hertz 32-inch, priced at $600. That seems like a pretty good price. And these were down at 600, but are now more at 700. So you're talking a little bit more for the LG monitor. So I guess one point is, do you want something that I've personally tested or not? The LG I've tested, and I know it's good. But I think one of the things that would not make me go super against the Dell monitor necessarily is that I do believe it is using, based on some of the research that I've done previously, I believe it is a more recent panel, but I'm not 100% sure on that because there were some earlier panels that weren't amazing in terms of their performance and characteristics like that. So you could probably look up like a ratings review and see how that compares to some of the monitors that we've tested. If it's a newer panel that performs more like the 32GR93U, which is using a much more recent panel, then I would potentially consider it. But if it's one of those slower, older panels that's more in line with what I was testing a few years ago, then I would definitely recommend the LG over it. In fact, I can probably figure this out by looking at the ratings review there. They probably don't mind me having a look, right? Let's have a look. You can probably get a good idea of the panel performance and panel what panel it's using here. Adobe RGB is only 90%, so it's probably not one of those super wide gamut monitors. 70% Rec 2020 again points to it not being one of the super wide gamut slower monitors. And response time's looking pretty good here. Yeah, this would yeah, I think that'd be reasonable. But then again, that's just going by their testing, so I don't know how the numbers would play out in my testing methodology. But I think that would be reasonable. So either way, yeah, it just depends on what's sort of cheaper in your region and things like that. But I like ratings, good site if you want to compare some of the products that I haven't personally tested. Just make sure that you test ratings numbers versus ratings numbers, not ratings versus hardware unboxed. We do test a little differently. So if they're saying one product is a lot faster and I'm saying one product's a lot, my number's a lot higher than their number, it doesn't necessarily mean the two monitors have drastically different speed or anything. It could just be down to testing methodology. Right, what else? Would much rather see mini LED monitors and all these OLEDs coming out. Yes, I'm very interested to see how the lower cost mini LED monitors go. I think there's a lot of room there for mini LED to come in around $500, $600 US and offer something good. So I'll be hoping to test that soon. What is the best 32-inch gaming monitor for competitive gaming? No curve with a 16:9 ratio. I bought the LG 32GQ950 for that. What do you think? So you bought a 32-inch, I believe. I think some people have been asking about this on this video previously, that is the 4K 144 hertz monitor. So yeah, pretty good. I mean, you're looking at 4K, you're looking at IPS, you're looking at 144 hertz, which is a great monitor for gaming. For competitive gaming with no curve 16:9, yeah, I mean, there are 32-inch 240 hertz monitors. So that would be a consideration, especially at 1440p. But again, depends what you want, right? Like if you specifically want 4K at that size, which I can understand because 1440p at 32 inches is not amazing. If you want that size, then 4K is a good way of going about it, and that's a reasonably priced monitor, so it's pretty reasonable. Certainly reasonable. But for competitive gaming, if I was buying something today, I'd probably be waiting for the 32-inch 4K OLEDs next year, which is supposed to be 4K, 32-inch, 240 hertz. And if you use, upscaling DLSS, something like that, that could still be a good option for competitive gaming. You could even run it at 1080p and still benefit from all the OLED stuff. What would you suggest for AA and CRPG gamer who has a 6950 XT with a 27-inch 144Hz 1440p 4 millisecond IPS panel right now? 50/50 game/productivity. Thank you. Well, again, with these questions, it really depends on the price that you have. So the price point that you have in mind is going to dictate a lot. If you don't have much more than, say, $400 US to spend, then I probably would just stick with the monitor that you've got right now. To be honest, even today, that's a really great bang for buck category, and everything below sort of the $300 price point, I'd be recommending 27-inch 144Hz 1440p. and the upgrades that you'll be getting are probably pretty minimal. Unless you have a monitor from a long, like if you had a first generation one of those panels, then you might get an upgrade going to a similar spec, more modern panel. But again, you'd probably be wanting at least like 240 hertz or something like that, which again are like $300 to $400 at the moment. So that could be an option for you, especially for 50/50 game/productivity. You'll probably be sticking more with IPS. The other option, depending on the games that you're playing and how much performance you're getting out of your 6950 XT, is go to 4K. Again, you can spend as little as $450, $500 US on 4K these days, and that'll be a really good choice for productivity as well. So things like that is probably what I'd be considering, unless, of course, you really want like OLED and HDR and things like that. Chad asks, what do you think of the KTC M27 T20? So I'd love to look at KTC monitors at some point in the future. However, we're currently at an impasse with KTC on their monitor review program. So we can't really buy KTC monitors in Australia super well. A lot of them are imports and things like that. And I've been trying to work with KTC for a little while now in reviews, but they have some requirements as part of their review program that I don't agree with. So things like not being able to compare KTC monitors to other major brands such as Samsung and LG. I was like, I'm never going to agree to that as to receive a review sample. I would absolutely never agree to something like that. So either the options are I don't review KTC monitors or I buy them. They're not, I get a few recommendations to people or people requesting them, but not a lot. So investing in brands that may not get heaps of views is not something I'm super willing to do at the moment. But yeah, the big issue really was that they were willing to send review samples, but only if I agreed to certain things. I don't want to agree to those certain requirements. As I said, not comparing to certain products and things like that. So until that's resolved, and I'm still trying to convince them to not have requirements like that in their review programs, or I don't know whether I'm part of a review program or an influencer program, because sometimes YouTubers are seen more as influencers where, paid reviews and things like that are more commonplace. I don't do paid reviews. I do independent reviews and testing. I don't agree to certain restrictions and requirements on reviews. So yeah, that's why we don't test KTC monitors at the moment, and that's why I do not have plans to test that product and really don't have too many thoughts on it. If that changes in the future, then something may be a little different. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. And again, I guess I should probably be clear as well that I don't know if KTC's said those requirements to other people. So I don't know if other reviews testing their monitors have been affected by those statements or not that they've been making. I'm not sure. All I know is that they've requested that from me, and I've said no. I bought the Odyssey G8 OLED for the equivalent of about $800 US. Was it a good deal? It also makes whining sounds behind the monitor. Is that normal? Interesting. A few people have been mentioning to me recently about the OLED G8, a more recent batch of those monitors having a few coil whine issues. A couple of people mentioned, I think one person emailed me, a few people have mentioned in our Discord community for, various, our Patreon Float Play members. They've mentioned that they bought a more recent version of the OLED G8 and it had coil whine, but a previous version didn't or something. So it's potentially, if you're getting whining signs with your monitor, that there is a bad batch of those Samsung monitors. And again, Samsung has had QA issues or quality control issues with some of their products previously. So it is possible that there's a dodgy batch of those products floating around there. You did get a really good deal. $800 is a great price. It's probably as low as we've seen for the QD OLEDs. And at least the version that I bought, which did not have coil whine, performed really well. So if you could get what I was suggesting in my review, the performance level that was seen in my review, great monitor, you got a great price. But if you are seeing coil whine, I would consider at least contacting Samsung and seeing what they're saying about that issue, whether you can get a return or replacement. And again, you may return it, get a monitor back that still has the same issue, and you might just go through a cycle of continually getting the same monitor back. And obviously it's very frustrating and annoying to have to deal with that sort of thing. But yeah, normally when someone, like, I get a one-off statement saying like you're getting coil whine on a particular product or something like that, usually that can come down to a variety of factors, things like the quality of power in your area. Are you running it through a whole bunch of power bricks and things like that, or are you running it through a UPS? UPSs can often clean up the power signal, which can reduce coil wind for some products. Are you in a 110 volt or a 240 volt region? That can also affect the the performance of the transformers inside the unit and things like that. So those are the normal things that I would say when I hear about coil wind. But now that a few people, there's sort of more of a mass of people saying this about that particular monitor, potentially we're seeing more of a bad batch there. So not sure, but we'll see what happens there. Do you recommend disabling motion blur in all games? Yes. If you are playing at 60 FPS or above, I generally recommend disabling motion blur, especially if you're buying a monitor for high performance. A lot of people, when they're buying a monitor, they look at things like response times. They look at refresh rate. They want to make sure they're getting the clearest, cleanest experience, the least amount of ghosting, the least amount of blur. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to prioritize all those things in a monitor and then turn on motion blur, because there's no point having a high performance monitor, no point having like a 240 hertz super fast display to then turn on motion blur and just blur the whole thing. So especially at gaming at like 90, 100 FPS, definitely would recommend disabling motion blur. It can make sense for 30 hertz gaming, but I'm not sure we're much of a 30 hertz gaming channel here. All right. A couple more questions here. I think we'll go just a little longer and then we'll call it a day on the stream. Is the VG27AQ-L3A a good monitor at $280 US? Any monitors like it that you'd recommend instead of it, or 240 hertz options? Currently on an LG 27-inch 1080p 240 hertz monitor. So I'm not super familiar with this product, so I'll just do some quick Googling. But by the sounds of it, this is an Asus monitor. Okay, interesting. What have we got here? 180 hertz, 1440p. 130 hertz. Okay, let's put this up on the screen, actually. Let's go. Okay, interesting. So there's not too much known about this monitor. I didn't see it on PC Part Picker either. I wonder if I can gather too much information about its panel from what we're seeing from the specs here. 96% DCI-P3. If this is a newer monitor, again, if you're talking about $270 US, is it a good monitor? Well, first of all, I'll say I haven't tested it, so I don't know if it's good. So that's pretty much how much I can say based on things that I've tested. Again, there are monitors that I do recommend around $280 US that I have tested. So with all these types of considerations, it's always a question mark of, do you go with something that I have tested and I know is a quality product, or do you take the risk on a product that may be slightly more suited to your use cases, slightly better specifications or better price, but hasn't got as much testing behind it? And I can't really answer that question for you, because I personally would prefer the monitors that I've tested, so at least I know that it's a quality product, but you may have a different opinion there. I think for 240 hertz, again, depends on your region. If you're willing to spend $280, the other day someone was saying the GR27GR83Q, this LG monitor, was priced as low as, well, I've seen it at $350. Someone said they got it for $300, or maybe the equivalent of $300 in their region. So if you do see this monitor for $300 US, I would certainly get that. I'd spend the $20 more and get that, because if you're coming from, say, 1080p 240 hertz, again, you'll be going backwards, going 14. I mean, you're not going backwards in resolution, but you are going backwards in refresh rate. So I'd personally try and get something like this, or just maybe save up a little bit more money so that you can make that step up to 1440p 240 hertz. But we've also got the G274 QPX from MSI, which is out of stock now, probably because I recommended it too much, but used to be $330. So again, and that's sort of been the lowest price for the last week, 10 days-ish, and was previously that price again about a month ago. So if that's the sort of product that you're interested in, again, it's a $50 increase in your budget, which you may not be willing to go to. Those are the sorts of monitors that I'd be considering, or alternatively, as I said, the 1440p 165, 180 hertz monitors that I have tested. But yeah, can't say too much about monitors that I haven't tested at the moment. Asus ROG Strix XG32UQ any good? On sale for $670. Not too bad price there. So let me just refresh myself on what this monitor is. I have heard of it before. Sorry. Okay. Right, so this is one of the, have I even tested this? I might have tested this monitor, come to think of it. Let me just have a look. XG. No, I only tested the XG32VQR and a few other ones. Right, so I haven't tested this. I've tested almost 200 monitors, so sometimes it's hard to remember. So, with this product, what it comes down to with the 32-inch 4K monitors is whether or not you're getting a newer panel or getting an older panel. The older panels are really not very good, and they have been far superseded by some of the newer monitors. So earlier we were talking about the G3223Q. Again, very similar discussion to this monitor in terms of if this is using a newer panel, could be worth recommending. If it's using an older panel, probably not worth recommending. And that'll come down to looking at different reviews and performance characteristics and things. It having display HDR 600 means it's probably an edge-lit panel, so HDR is probably not a consideration that I'd be thinking of. But again, like the general specs of like the 4K IPS panels, the newer ones, we've looked at like 32GR93U recently. That has much better performance than some of those older panels. But I believe this is a newer monitor. Let's just have a look. See when some of the reviews were starting to come in. Okay. Some of the reviews from like late last year to earlier this year is probably more of a chance that it's a better quality newer panel. But again, I can't say too much. Like I don't want to sit here saying, yes, it's definitely a good quality panel because I just haven't tested it. So that's pretty much where I'm at on that one. Again, has Ratings tested it? Because that would probably give us a good indication. Is that the same monitor? No. All right. So because neither I or they have tested that monitor, unfortunately, there's probably not much I can say about it too much. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Right. This person has a ViewSonic XG2703-GS. That was, I think I tested that monitor back in the day. It would have been a while ago now, long time ago. But that was not too bad of a monitor. You'd probably, I think that was prior to the Nano IPS generation of monitors. So you would see a small performance improvement, small to moderate performance improvement in terms of response times, but I just don't think it's worth justifying an upgrade just for that. I'd probably be wanting, you could get a really good deal on it and get a better product for a low price and it'd be okay, but I'd be wanting not just the response time improvement. I'd be wanting, whether that's a higher color gamut or better color accuracy or refresh rate or other benefits to consider doing that upgrade. But at the time, I recall that being a reasonable monitor. So yeah, I'd probably still be waiting at the moment for that. Right, someone here says that there was a very professional review on one of those Bilibili, which I believe is like is that Chinese social media? Something like that. Yeah, use a newer panel from AU Optronics. So if it uses a newer panel, then you're probably set to go if you can find that going all right. As far as I'm aware, there is only one single 4K OLED 27-inch monitor on the market, and it's the LG Ultrafine OLED Pro. Would love a video on this. Yeah, a few people have asked me over the years about testing those more professional OLED monitors, the ones that are like 4K 60 Hz. They use the J OLED panels. Again, the reason why we don't test a lot of those types of monitors is that I don't have a lot of good comparative data going back and looking at, what other professional monitors make sense. I can sort of look at it as like a preview, as sort of like, here, this is what this product does. But a lot of our reviews are really based on the comparison data that we've built up over the years. And we just don't really have that for the Pro monitors. So I would personally be interested in looking at it. And I'm sure that there'll be some interest from viewers as well. But right now there's like 400 gaming monitors released a year. And at best I can cover 30 or 40 of them a year. And that's if I'm really pushing it. So at the moment, we're just sticking with gaming monitors for now. Maybe in the future, we'll look more at Pro monitors and things like that. But yeah, at the moment, I think the focus will remain on the gaming monitors and things like that. Yeah, do you think resale value after a couple of years for OLED monitor will stay around the MSRP? I don't think so. I guess it would depend on the wear and tear of monitors. If there starts to become a reputation of gaming monitors reducing, burning in relatively quickly, and I think a lot of people will be concerned about buying a used OLED, especially after a couple of years. So I don't imagine you'll be getting the MSRP for them. How well they hold up is also questionable. And I think there'll be a lot of price pressure from newer monitors pushing down the price of the older OLEDs. So if you bought it at like $1,000 within a few years, even buying it new, that could be a a $700 product, in which case then obviously you're not getting the MSRP anymore. So that's probably how I would see something like that with those sorts of OLEDs. And yeah, I don't know. We'll look at the OLED market used at some point in the future to see how it goes. But yeah, I wouldn't be holding my breath for it to maintain its value at the moment. If I have a 4090, should I buy 3 4K monitors or just one main one and then a couple of 1440p for side monitors, 50/50 gaming and productivity? So I have a triple 4K monitor setup that I use for productivity, and I think it's excellent. So I personally would highly recommend that sort of setup. The main difference that you would see between, let's say, your main 4K versus side 1440p will be the resolution and scaling annoyances in Windows, which I mentioned, I think, in a previous question. If you move one window from your 4K monitor to 1440p, Windows will have to do this like automatic resizing thing, which is a little slow, a little sluggish. Whereas if you had all the same resolution, moving windows from one to another is much smoother. So that's one benefit that you can get when you get 3 of the same resolution monitor. But obviously you have to spend a lot more money typically for that. So that's something to consider. It also would depend on the type of productivity that you get, the size of the monitors, the sort of, if you're looking at a lot of text, then especially at a 32-inch size, you benefit a lot from 4K for productivity on those side monitors. But if you're just going to put on a YouTube video or something, it's not going to be a major difference, I wouldn't have thought. But yeah, 50/50 gaming productivity, would you use, the iFinity / NVIDIA surround features and play your games across all 3 4K monitors? I'm not sure I'd do that. But yeah, I think the ultimate solution there would be the 3 4K monitors. It's just that little bit nicer to use than the different resolutions and things like that. Okay, what else have we got here? As I said, probably not too much of this stream left. Might go for another 5 or 10 minutes and wrap it up after the 2 hours. Lots of questions. It's been really appreciate all the people that have sent in their questions via Super Chats, and we've been able to get in a couple of other main chat questions as well over the time. So yeah, really appreciate it. How do you feel about the Asus Tough Gaming VG27 AQ1A at $180 US? Yeah, I recently flagged that as a potential monitor choice for especially people in Europe where it's really cheap at the moment. Again, it's not a product I've tested, and I'm yet to see for sure how those entry-level IPS panels go. So it's always like maybe not sure. But the price is pretty hard to ignore. And if the panel turns out to perform pretty well, then I think it'll be a good quality buy. But again, if I haven't tested it, it's hard to say too much about it, and I don't want to be recommending products that could end up being really crap, because I've seen that a couple of times recently with buying a product that's been like the cheapest in a product series. And sometimes those monitors are good, but sometimes they're like really bad and definitely not worth recommending. So yeah, unfortunately without reviews, it's really hard to say. And a lot of the time they don't reveal information about like panel technology or what the panel is that's being used, because that would provide a lot more insights. We could compare that to monitors that we maybe have tested, but unless we know that, then yeah, it's just really hard to say. I'm tossing up between the XG27 AQMR and the PG27 AQN. How much better is the PG? Is it worth it over the XG27? So let's just double check the price, because I think I was talking about this recently in that it is only $500 US. So that makes a big consideration in my mind. Let me just check the PG27 AQN pricing. $900. So let's have a look here. So this is what we're looking at. This is what we're faced with. $1,050, obviously very expensive for the PG27 AQN, but at places like Newegg, I believe a couple of days ago, maybe still at other retailers, you can get it for $900. The XG27 AQMR, the 300 hertz version, you can get that for $500. That's a huge price difference. We're talking like $500 difference, almost half the price. So is the PG27 AQN worth it? I would say no at that sort of price difference. 300 hertz, 360 versus 300 hertz when you're using it for just normal gaming, so not using backlight strobing, so just adaptive sync experience, is not massive. It's really very minor, I would say, in most situations. However, the PG27 AQN from memory is a little better tuned. So let me just get up my data on this other monitor that will tell me how much of a difference it was in response times. So the XG27 AQMR had cumulative deviation of 414, and the AQN was 289, so 3 milliseconds with 7% inverse ghosting rate for the AQN versus a 4.9 millisecond average with a 9% inverse ghosting rate for the 300 hertz version. So that's a reasonable difference. You're getting 3/4 of the cumulative deviations. That's probably going to look a little clearer in motion at those across the refresh rate range. And obviously being a G-Sync monitor as well, it has variable overdrive. So it is a better monitor. Don't get me wrong, it's a better monitor. And with ULMB2, it's quite significantly better. So I guess it comes down to, if I was definitely going to use backlight strobing, I was playing at the highest refresh rate, I was using a fixed refresh, I was using backlight strobing, the PG27 AQN is going to be quite a bit better. You're going to benefit from the higher refresh rate and strobing at that refresh rate. This is provided you have an NVIDIA GPU, which you need for that configuration on that product. You just run the firmware update, you get it, it's all good. It will be a lot better. If you're not using backlight strobing, the $400-$500 price difference to go 300 hertz to 360 hertz with slightly better, it is better response time. Not slightly better, it is better. I don't think that's worth it. I think that's a huge price to pay. So I personally, especially with this monitor now at $500 US, I personally would get this. If it was more at $650 that it launched at, I think it's, again, it is still a huge premium. So yeah, the PG27 AQN is really a niche product for a certain type of gamer. And I just don't think it's quite there yet at the price to make it like a wide recommendation. What do you think about the Odyssey G6/G5 for $500? We don't have many cheaper good brand options here in Brazil. Are these monitors even good? So there's a lot of Odyssey G6 and Odyssey G5 monitors. Unfortunately, I believe I think the G6 is just a 240 hertz VA version. So there's that, and we've got the Odyssey G5 as well. I wonder if we've got testing information on it, because normally my primary concern with getting the Samsung, the lower tier VA monitors for the 1440p ones, is whether or not they use the Odyssey G7-like specs, which give us the excellent VA performance, or whether they're the slower VA panels that give us lots of dark level smearing. If it's heaps of dark level smearing, very slow for those sorts of rises and falls in the dark region, then yeah, it's potentially not going to be a product that I'd be interested in recommending. But if it's more of a G6, so the G6, just having a look at some of the stuff that I'm seeing on ratings, it looks to be pretty similar to the G7 in terms of its performance, in which case that could be a good buy. But if let's have a look at the G5. That's actually not too badly priced in the US either. But again, I haven't tested it, so I don't want to go slamming recommendations left, right, and center. So the G5, that comes in a 144 hertz version. The 165 hertz 34-inch version is a 32-inch version with those specs. So yeah, my main concern with that would be this, again, the slow VA panel. I think it's probably not, again, it depends what else is available in your region. If you say there's not a lot of other good options, then it's, obviously questionable as to, how good that is. But I'm just, because Ratings has tested these monitors, which is always nice. Okay, so definitely don't get the G5. I'll show you here. This is the Ratings review. So thanks to Ratings for testing some of the products that we don't test here. This is dark level smearing type stuff right there. So that's classic dark level smearing behavior. Would not recommend that. So they've tested here the 27-inch 1440p version. Would not recommend it based on that. Previously though, I had looked at, have I still got it up here? Yes, here. This is the G6. Again, Ratings testing. We're seeing, much better performance in those dark areas, just looking at their charts here. So this seems to be more of a G7. The G5 seems to be more of a classic lower cost VA panel. So I wouldn't get that. If 50-50 production and gaming, wait for 4K OLEDs. Yeah, I'd say so, potentially. I mean, depends what your production is and things like that. So 4K OLED's probably going to give you better, the pixel, sub-pixel structure thing's not going to be too much of a concern at 4K OLED compared to what we saw with the latest generation panels. But again, it's all going to come down to like burn-in warranty, things like that, what sort of longevity they're expecting from these products. So, yeah. And one last question here. This will be the final question before we wrap this stream up, I think. For 240Hz 1440p OLED, I'm stuck between the LG 27GR95QE and Asus PG27AQDM. Heard the Asus is brighter, but the LG is $300 cheaper right now. What would you recommend? Yeah, tough choice between those two monitors. I think that the higher tier product, the PG27AQDM, is worth the extra money. But at a $300 difference, you're talking about like a 30% price cut. So that's a pretty substantial difference in terms of performance. So in terms of price. And at that price, like with the firmware update, you're still getting about 200 nits or even higher than 200 nits from the 27GR95QE. Its HDR performance is still pretty similar in a lot of aspects. You are missing out on that top-end brightness. But I think for a lot of use cases, the LG is still a pretty good option. And at a $300 discount, I think I'd probably get the LG most of the time. I think the extra brightness is nice, and you will see that in games play out some of the time, but you are still getting, those two monitors are some of the most accurate of the HDR, those type of OLED monitors. So if it goes right down to the darker ranges, you're getting pretty similar performance from those two products. And a lot of HDR does come down to its performance for darks, contrast, those sorts of things. So I don't think you'd be disappointed with the LG for $300 less. And maybe you can put that $300 to some other aspect of your build, whether that's improving your graphics card or buying more SSD storage for all your games and things like that. Personally, yeah, the performance differences, they're the same panel, so there can't be too much of a difference between those two things in a lot of its key areas. So, yep. Salvation also asks, do you recommend DLSS quality to ultra settings in 2K and 4K or prefer native resolution at high settings? Yeah, I think DLSS, if you're playing at 4K, DLSS quality using ultra settings probably makes more sense. At 2K, so 1440p, depends more on the implementation of DLSS, the quality that you're getting, how much of a downgrade you're getting from high settings versus ultra. So, ultra settings, yeah, depends. There's a lot of games where high makes no difference or very little difference, whereas DLSS would make more of a difference. It just depends. It really depends on the game at 1440p. I think 4K is more reliably good with DLSS, whereas, 1440p, again, depends on the implementation, the type of game, those sorts of things. All right, so that is the final question for this stream. We'll be going for 2 hours, which is pretty good. 2 hours of monitor recommendations nonstop. I've done a fair few. We've looked at a whole bunch of different products. We've talked about all sorts of different use cases and scenarios. So, yeah, hopefully people that have joined into this stream and were hoping for some more personalized buying advice got it from this sort of video. So, yeah, hopefully if you've enjoyed this video and you want another live monitor recommendation stream in the future, then let me know. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the stream. We'll head back in at some point in the future and we'll do another one of these because this is the first one. I wasn't really sure how it would go, how many people would watch, how many people wanted recommendations. Seems like there was way more than I could get to. So I'm sorry to everyone in the comments that I couldn't get to your recommendations, but I think I probably got about, 4,000 recommendation suggestions in this one and just can't get to that in the one video. So yeah, if you're still wanting recommendations, we do have across Hardware Unboxed and Monitors Unboxed all of our current recommendation content. So we've got the best monitors video, which is over on Hardware Unboxed, best monitors for Europe, which is on Monitors Unboxed, as well as our 1440p HDR 4K recommendations are on this channel as well. And coming up towards the end of this week, we're going to be doing recommendations of monitors per price point. So we're just going to go through, say, if you got $250, buy this, $300, buy this, $350, buy this. So that will be up towards the end of the week. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching this stream. Hope everyone enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.